Hello out there. We're just giving a little bit of time for the stream to get started, for me to get the alert that says, hey, you're live. Hey, there's the alert that says we're live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ECS Network. We got just a couple minutes here before I actually start talking about, what I'm talking about, which is the booking office live. As I am booking the 1991 WWF with WCW's Babyfaces. We took last week off because, frankly, I needed time to figure some of this stuff out. Turns out booking WrestleMania is hard. With that said, before I actually start talking about the challenge and what we're doing on this week's show, I want to send, on behalf of the entire ECS network, everyone here from Rage Quit Radio to, of course, the Denzi Caster crew that I host, to Chopsaki Cinema, to 8 Star Anime, all points in between. We want to send our thoughts, our prayers, our well wishes to the folks who are recovering from Hurricane Harvey down in Houston, Texas, and all of our thoughts and prayers and well wishes to those that are in the path of Hurricane Irma, which, as we are talking, has yet to hit the U.S. It's going to hit the Caribbean, and then right now projected to hit Florida, and it's not looking good, folks. So if you're in any of those areas, of course, we hope that you are either getting out of Dodge or taking every precaution you can to keep you and yours safe. And if you're not in those areas, we very much encourage you to give to local charities, to the Red Cross, or anyone else that's helping with those, with the relief efforts, whether you're giving money or time or food and water or what have you, because in a time of disaster like that, they need everything they can get. So we very much encourage you to do that. I'll be talking with the other ECS network hosts to see if maybe there's something we can do here on our meager little channel to help out as well. So that said, we are less than a minute from Turner time as we start talking about WrestleMania 7, or at least my version thereof. I always will jump on a couple minutes early, and since we always say it's 8:05 is when we start, I give it until then before I actually start talking about content. Of course, hope you check out the other shows here on the ECS network. Rage Quit Radio this past Monday was, oh my goodness, I think he said, hopingly, I think it was World's Fair 1893 is what we played Monday. We finished up Space Sheriff Gavin on Denzi Blitz yesterday. Tomorrow on Denzi Caster, I think it's some more Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon. And I honestly don't remember what's going to be on 8 Star Anime Friday. So, well, folks, it is 8:05 Eastern Time in the AM. It is Turner time, which means it is time for the Booking Office Live. I'm Mike, a.k.a. Greg Hunter, and I have been given the unenviable task by John the Body Johnson of my erstwhile former broadcast colleague from Anarchy Wrestling to rebook the WWF in 1991, but using WCW's Babyfaces. So, if you've watched our last 3 parts, part 1, I kind of went over the roster so you would know who I got and what we were doing and kind of my general thoughts. Part 2 was me rebooking the Royal Rumble, and then part 3, which was a couple of weeks ago, was me booking the main event in February, kind of helping get everything set for WrestleMania. Now, a brief history lesson. In real life, WrestleMania 7 was originally announced as taking place at the Los Angeles Olympic Coliseum, which is an outdoor building, and for a myriad of reasons, some of which may or may not have been contrived, They moved to the LA Memorial Sports Arena, much smaller venue, and indoors. So depending on who you listen to and which narrative you believe, they either moved it indoors because they were scared for Sergeant Slaughter's life, that it wouldn't be feasible to secure the outdoor venue, or they just didn't sell enough tickets and they moved to a smaller venue so they wouldn't have to try to hide a whole lot of empty seats outdoors. Like I said, depends on which narrative you believe. WrestleMania took place on Sunday, March 24th, 1991. In our world, it always takes place at the LA Memorial Sports Arena. We've been announcing it like that since January 1. Why? Because I have no Hulk Hogan, I have no Ultimate Warrior, I have none of the top stars that the WWF has been built on up to 1991 on the babyface side. So I know good and well that that's not going to work out too well. So there you go. Now, the original WrestleMania 7, for the sake of comparison and argument, the original WrestleMania 7 was 14 matches on pay-per-view, 15 overall. There was a dark match. Most matches were in about the 5-minute range. I think that's probably the average if you average it all up. The opening match went about 10 minutes, the Rockers versus the Barbarian and Haku. The tag title match went about 12, which was the Nasty Boys winning the titles from the Hart Foundation. Warrior and Savage went about 20. Bossman and Perfect for the Intercontinental title went to a DQ finish in about 11. And the world title match was the second longest match of the night. Warrior Savage was the longest. But the world title match also went 20, just a few seconds shorter than the retirement match, with Hogan beating Slaughter for the world title. My card has fewer matches, but I also have longer matches by and large. And this is part of my personal booking philosophy, which is I've never been a big believer in having the big show have a ton of wrestlers on it. I would much rather give you quality over quantity. That's always been my philosophy in that regard, right? I would much rather you have fewer really good matches than a lot of subpar matches and one or two good ones. So it's still a long show, with all things considered. We've built the show basically around 4 matches. I'm not going to go over the angles for everything, simply because some of these are frankly just matches that are setting things up down the road. I've had about 2 months to build between the main event and WrestleMania. I have all of February and then up to March 24th. So we're going to broad stroke it because it's a long, long, long show. So, and I don't want to take everybody's time all morning long. So here we go. Opening match for WrestleMania is going to see the Renegade Warriors facing the Powers of Pain. The Renegade Warriors are Mark and Jay Youngblood. At least I think that's who the Renegade Warriors are. It may not be Jay Youngblood. Jay Youngblood is Ricky Steamboat's partner. It's Mark and something. Mark and Chris Youngblood. So Mark and Chris Youngblood, the Renegade Warriors, young babyface tag team. I want to get them some exposure on a big stage because they have the potential to be something longer term for the company. They're going to go over on the Powers of Pain in about 15 minutes in a very babyface finish, probably like a roll-up or a schoolboy or something out of nowhere. For the record, they pinned the Barbarian because the Barbarian's the smaller of the two. Second match, and there's no real build-up. We probably don't even announce that match on TV. Build-up, the Renegade Warriors get some quality wins on TV. The Powers of Pain get some quality wins on TV. Second match on the card, and this is actually going to be us creating a story moving forward. It's going to be Dustin Rhodes, who enters the WWF at the beginning of March. Remember, part of JJ's challenge was anyone that entered WCW as a babyface over the course of 91 will enter the WWF that same time in 1991. So WCW had Dustin Rhodes debut in March of 91, so in this world, I have him in the WWF. Dustin Rhodes is going to defeat Virgil with $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase in his corner in 5 minutes with the Bulldog headlock. The setup for this is probably going to come over the course of several weeks. We're initially going to have Dustin Rhodes on TV winning matches with the Bulldog. And we're going to be seeing Dustin on TV regularly. Eventually, we're going to see Virgil coming out and watching the matches with Dustin, where it's just Virgil. No promos, no explanation, just the announcers going, why in the world is Virgil here? And probably Heenan on commentary saying something along the lines of, well, he's more than just DiBiase's manservant, McMahon. Then eventually we have DiBiase out with Virgil seeing this, and then DiBiase issues the challenge that he wants Dustin Rhodes to face Virgil at WrestleMania. He wants to get the measure of the young man. Are you half the man your daddy was? And when Dustin beats Virgil handily in 5 minutes, it's basically a job match at WrestleMania. DiBiase is going to try to hire Rhodes after the match. I couldn't buy off your daddy, but you're not your dad. Dustin Rhodes will turn him down flat. I'm not my father, but I am my father's son. At which point DiBiase and Virgil leave poor Dustin Rhodes laying. This is setting up a program for Rhodes and DiBiase down the road. Match number 3 for the World Tag Team titles. The champions, Power and Glory, will defeat the Rock and Roll Express in 20 minutes. The finish is going to be Ricky Morton passing out in the full Nelson from Hercules and the referee stopping the match. Really solid match, typical Rock and Roll Express battling from underneath. We've been setting this up with the Rock and Rolls getting some quality wins. We got Robert Gibson pinning Hercules at the main event last month in the 6-man tag, which was the standby match. The Rock and Rolls and Tommy Rich against Power and Glory and Randy Savage. This is a continuation. We're probably not going to jump right into a Rock and Roll Express Power and Glory rematch. We're probably going to have both of them go off and do something else briefly and come back to it. But I'm wanting, basically we're getting the gutsy, never say die performance out of the Rock and Roll Express. And the full Nelson finish with someone giving up is going to be a recurring thing for Hercules the entire month. Or 2 months leading up to this. We will have even seen it before that in TV squash matches and whatnot. Ricky Morton's going to be the first person that doesn't give up to the full Nelson. He actually passes out in the hold. And that'll become some rhetoric going down the road was, well, they couldn't defeat, they couldn't defeat the Power and Glory, and then the babyface rhetoric is, yes, but they never gave up. He never said die. Then, match number 4 on the card is going to be Demolition, Smash, and Crush with Axe at ringside. Will defeat the Steiner Brothers in about 10 minutes. Again, this is set up, far-reaching stuff down the road. I just want to see these two teams clash at WrestleMania in a solid match. We're going to have a bullshit heel finish of some sort. Axe probably gets involved. Demolition goes over, but I don't want to compromise the Steiners, because the Steiners, of everyone on the WCW roster that could fit into the WWF seamlessly on the tag team side, the Steiner brothers are it, and in fact they did, just a little while later. So that's what we're going to do with them. Then we get to one of the matches that we built the card around. The World Tag Team title match is part of the build, but it's on the lower end. Up to the World Tag Team title match here at Mania, it's literally going to be a lot of talk spots, not a whole lot of physicality between the two teams, practically none. We saw something at the main event. They're not going to touch after that. It's just going to be a lot of talk back and forth on TV, quality wins back and forth, and that's it. They don't need to get physical in between, because the next match has all the physicality in the world attached to it. And that's going to be match number 5 on my WrestleMania card. which my WrestleMania card, for the record, as I glance over it real quick, I think is 9 matches, as opposed to the 14 pay-per-view matches that they had in real life. Nope, I've got 10. Okay. So 10 matches as opposed to the 14 that really happened. The next match is for the King of the Ring crown. No disqualification, no countout. Wildfire Tommy Rich goes one-on-one with the Macho King Randy Savage, who, of course, has Sensational Queen Sherri in his corner. Basically the setup to the match. We've had some setup going into the main event, which even included sort of a WWF version. You know, we've had the big brawl at the Royal Rumble. We've continued things shortly thereafter on the main event. We're not going to have Rich and Savage on TV against each other in a match after the main event. We're initially going to have Tommy Rich doing the babyface, you know, somebody say fired up rhetoric a handful of times. We're gonna get a lot of promos out of Tommy Rich and a lot of promos out of Randy Savage because they excel at them. We're probably going to get the weeks leading up to this. The original match at the Royal Rumble ends in a double DQ. I need to justify the no countout stipulation here on top of the no DQ. And we're going to justify the no countout stipulation by having essentially a WWE version of Ye Olde Concession Stand Brawl. We're going to have Randy Savage probably a week, maybe 2. The match itself gets announced early on. But maybe a couple of weeks or 3 weeks before Mania, Savage is going to be just victimizing some poor young jobber in the ring, screaming at him, "Get up, Rich," acting as if this kid is Tommy Rich. He'll even probably cut a promo, you know, "Kid, I hate to tell you, yeah, but for the next ever how long I feel like it, yeah, your name is Tommy Rich, yeah." And just have him beat the bejesus out of this poor kid until the real Tommy Rich shows up. And when Tommy shows up, it basically becomes a massive brawl all over the building. Rather than looking like some pre-produced WWE crap where they would go through the curtain and there's another camera waiting for them, we're going to have one dude with a handheld. And we probably even see, if we could stage it properly in my perfect world, one camera at ringside is shooting them going up the aisle, and we see them pulling the power cord out of another camera. I would actually prefer to catch that, so that when we cut to that camera, we sort of, okay, wait, this isn't expected, and that guy takes off. We catch this. We're not supposed to see it. So this guy runs down, follows them, and they fight all over the building, all the way out into the concession stand, out to the merchandise area. It's a train wreck. It's a fight, which will justify Jack Tunney saying no count out, no DQ. The one fall to a finish, there's got to be a winner. Randy Savage is, Tommy Rich is saying, if someone has to be king to the masses of the WWF, let it be a man the WWF can see and stand behind. Let it be a king in the tradition of Jim Duggan and the tradition, and start naming off some of the baby faces that have been king. It doesn't need to be someone that lords it over people like Randy Savage. Since this is what makes your clock tick, I'm taking that. I'm taking the crown. And so, Savage, we see Elizabeth getting more and more involved a couple of weeks out after that promo is cut. And so the week before WrestleMania, and we're going to plaster this promo all over the place, Savage does his match in the ring, which Sherri was instrumental in. We are going to have, even though she didn't need to be, she's doing it because she can. That's a typical heel thing. Savage doesn't need her to win, but why make it hard on yourself? So Savage is going to wind up with all this going down, and you're going to see up on the stage. We'll have the interview on the podium with Mean Gene, and it's going to be Tommy Rich standing there saying, "Hey, Macho King, it's become obvious to me that doing this one-on-one, man-on-man is not your way of doing things. It's obvious to me that one way or another, Scary Queen Sherry's going to get involved. So I'll tell you what, Jack, if you're going to have a lady sitting there pulling all the dirty tricks, I think I should have somebody watching my back that knows all your dirty tricks." And he introduces Miss Elizabeth. So Miss Elizabeth is in Tommy Rich's corner, while Randy Savage has Sherry in his corner. The ladies' involvement will be minimal. It will basically be Sherry trying to get involved and Elizabeth stooging her off. I don't want Elizabeth to get physically involved in the match. But the match goes all over the place, up and down the aisle, all around ringside. Toys, not toys like we see today, but like maybe there's a steel chair here. Maybe somewhere that somebody uses a ring bell. There's lots of brawling outside, the steps, and all this other stuff. It is going to be violent. 20 minutes. Tommy Rich goes over with the Fez press and becomes the king of the ring. So he is King Wildfire. In something very similar to what happened in real life, after Savage loses his crown, Sherry turns on him while Rich and Elizabeth are walking back up the aisle. And Sherry turns on Savage as he's down and hurt and dejected, been pounded, to almost unconsciousness by Rich, and vice versa. Neither man leaves this match looking physically in good condition. Probably some color, probably from Rich. And as they're walking up the aisle, our cameras will catch Tommy Rich and Miss Elizabeth, and Elizabeth looking back at the ring, seeing what's going on, somewhat torn, and Rich looks at her and says, "Go." And as soon as he says that, Elizabeth bolts back up the aisle, gets in the ring, shit can Sherry, just like she did in real life. And we have the reunion of Randy Savage and Elizabeth, and that's Randy Savage's face turn. Savage, for the record, not retired, but now he's going to make the turn to being a babyface with Miss Elizabeth. Next match, Lex Luger versus Rick Martel. We probably just set this up a week before in some promos. Again, anybody you see in a match at WrestleMania has been getting wins on TV. Just assume that. Luger goes over in 10 minutes, probably with the torture rack. Then we have the Intercontinental Championship. We set this one up back at the main event. This one's going to be a lot of talking from Bobby Heenan and a lot of ring work from Brad Armstrong. But it's going to be Mr. Perfect, the Intercontinental Champion, with Bobby the Brain Heenan in his corner against Brad Armstrong for the Intercontinental Championship. This stems from Brad Armstrong pinning Perfect in a tag match at the main event in February. So what you're going to wind up with is about 25 minutes of a clinic. My instructions to Perfect and Armstrong would literally be, go out and tear the house down. We give them 25 minutes to do their thing. Perfect goes over clean as a whistle with the Perfect Plex. Bobby can tease interference, but he's never actually going to interfere. But Brad Armstrong, in his promos leading up to this, is going to be talking about the Armstrong legacy. His father, the Bullet Bob Armstrong, his brothers, Scott and Steve and Brian. He's going to be talking about all of these guys. My younger brother Brian, who one day wants to follow in the family footsteps. My brothers Scott and Steve, which obviously the Young Pistols. So we have another Armstrong in the company. We probably even have a little talk with both Smothers and Armstrong of the Young Pistols about Brad Armstrong. So we probably even have something like that from Steve Armstrong and Tracy Smothers. Probably going to have Steve Armstrong in a single match at some point against Mr. Perfect in a TV main event. Just as part of the setup to Mania. At the same time, we probably have Brad Armstrong taking on a quality heel like say the Mountie, or maybe a Haku. Probably a Haku now that I look at the roster again. Probably Haku, and gets a win over Haku because that's another guy managed by Bobby Heenan. On TV leading up to this, but it's a 25-minute clinic, and it's Mr. Perfect, just I'm perfect. I study, I watch, I know exactly what to do. I know the Armstrongs. I've beat your brother Steve. I've been studying you, etc., etc. And Brad Armstrong fighting for the legacy of the Armstrong family, but he does come up just a little bit short at WrestleMania. Mr. Perfect retains the Intercontinental Championship. After that, we've got the Orient Express with Mr. Fuji beating Pillman and Zink in 10 minutes. I just need something to let the crowd rest, basically, after that, because that IC title match is going to be bell to bell. I mean, I fully expect this to be comparable to the real-life perfect Bret Hart matches. And Brad Armstrong, if there was somebody in the business at this point in time that could have done that, the in-ring portion, as well as Bret Hart, it was probably Brad Armstrong. So I just need a couple of matches to bring the crowd back down before I get to the main event and just give them a chance to rest. So the Orient Express beats Pillman and Zink in 10 minutes with Mr. Fuji's assistance in all likelihood. And then though a gutsy effort out of Pillman and Zink. The Mountie will go one-on-one with the Stinger, the man called Sting. Mountie with Jimmy Hart in his corner. Sting goes over in 10 minutes. We're continuing to give Sting profile matches at big events, going over on baby faces. Although the one thing we're noticing here that I didn't notice when I first laid out the card, but this becomes one of those happy accidents that happen from time to time when you're booking. This is the second guy managed by Jimmy Hart that Sting has defeated on pay-per-view. So maybe we're leading towards a Sting versus Jimmy Hart program. Maybe Sting fills the role of Jerry Lawler in the WWF as Jimmy Hart's arch nemesis. I don't know if I'm going to do that yet or not. Although Sting, when you do see him, notice he was not on the main event last month. Now he's at WrestleMania. He was on the Royal Rumble. Typically speaking, I'm not putting him on primetime specials or anything like that, and I'm probably not putting him on TV a whole heck of a lot. The amount of TV matches he has will probably dwindle more and more, making him more of an attraction, because I want people to see him in that rarefied air. I mean, he's Sting. He was WCW's top babyface, so he's going to become, in many ways, my Hogan at this point. And then, for the World Heavyweight title, I have the All-American Ron Simmons going one-on-one with the World's Heavyweight Champion, Sergeant Slaughter, with General Adnan Al-Kaisi in his corner. In approximately 20 minutes, Ron Simmons hits the power slam on Sergeant Slaughter and wins the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania. This is analogous to what really did happen with Hulk Hogan beating Slaughter at Mania. Long and short is Slaughter at this point, part of it is me putting myself in the real world scenario. Slaughter was a polarizing figure in professional wrestling in 1991, and created a lot of negative press toward the WWF. So while I don't want to necessarily rush it, and I don't necessarily want it to be seen as a knee-jerk reaction, I need the belt off of Slaughter, and I need Slaughter off of TV for a little bit. Now, of course, in real life, they really continued this program through SummerSlam, though with Slaughter not being the world champion, with the deal with Hogan. But I don't know if I'm going to necessarily do that. But I am getting the belt off of him. Ron Simmons, we're going to see him in the role of the All-American. We're going to shoot the videos of him training at Florida State. We're going to shoot videos of him doing personal appearances at children's hospitals and at military bases and visiting wounded soldiers and the whole 9 yards, going to schools and speaking. We want Ron Simmons to be looked at as the all-American guy. So in many ways, very similar to Hulk Hogan. We're not going to have him go so far as to sign a Patriot missile that's going to get fired at Iraq, but we're going to see him as, you know, for want of a better term, the people's champ. That's the position I want Ron Simmons in. And then Slaughter, of course.